The Lifeline with Craig Roberts.
Welcome back to Lifeline. Craig Roberts along with constitutional lawyer, writer, and reporter Joe Murray. We're talking about the top stories of the week, and one of the big stories that's beginning to take on sort of a life of its own, unfortunately, is the story concerning Planned Parenthood, an ongoing undercover investigation that is bringing more and more information to light that Planned Parenthood apparently has been actively engaging in the harvesting of baby body parts and doing so for profit. And we have the most recent videotape that was released just this week, Joe, that's demonstrating that not only does it take place at least at one center, but when some debate concerning the value of said sale of body parts came into this conversation over lunch, the doctor in question representing Planned Parenthood said, well, I'm not really sure what a fair rate is. I'll have to contact some of the other centers to get more information, which says to me that this is more of a widespread practice within Planned Parenthood than they would ever want anybody to know.
Yeah, this controversy is going to shake Planned Parenthood to the core, because what it has done, Craig, is that it has removed the mask off of Planned Parenthood. Look, since Roe v. Wade was decided, and we've seen 55 million unborn children slaughtered, you have seen Planned Parenthood take the mantle that we are for women's rights, reproductive freedom. We are against a paternalistic society that has oppressed women. We're here to help women and to benefit mankind. That has been their mantra for so long. They've also told us, Craig, that abortion is not murder because you're only aborting basically a blob of cells, is what was predominantly used, especially during the 80s and the 90s. But now, when you see these videos and you see this Planned Parenthood exec, sipping wine, eating salad, and basically saying, liver, lungs, that's new. We've done livers, we've done hearts, and we make sure that when we do it, we don't crush here, we don't crush there. We try to keep everything intact, the extremities, all that stuff, so we can harvest them. When you see someone talking about human life so callously and so indifferently, it does shake who you are to the core, and that's what it's going to do to Planned Parenthood. It should shake them to the core, because have we reached the point, Craig, in our culture that we can just talk about harvesting the organs of aborted unborn fetuses and sip wine? Is that where we are as a country? I don't think we're there yet. I know Planned Parenthood doesn't think we're there yet, because that's why they do this all in secret. And I think that's why they're so scared about this scandal. Not about whether any laws were broken, not about whether there's going to be any congressional investigation, but about how the public is really going to finally see Planned Parenthood and what they're going to see as the real Planned Parenthood.
Well, I tell you what I see as the real Planned Parenthood. I see this as proof positive of what we have accused the organization of doing all along, and that is they're basically profiteers of death. Women come in, they manipulate them into having abortions. They make sometimes as much as $700, and if it's a later trimester abortion, to $1,200 per child that they abort. And then they turn around and apparently sell the body parts for hefty sums as well. And, of course, all the while do it with a very happy face, saying that they're just here to protect women's rights and to protect their reproductive rights.
And if you look at it, when this story broke, you had the defenders of Planned Parenthood come out, the New York Times editorial board being one of them, and their defense was, Planned Parenthood was tricked. They did nothing wrong. This is all lawful, and they had the consent of the mothers. And I read their defense, Craig, and I thought to myself, okay, let's just pause for a second and say no laws were broken. Okay, let's just suspend reality and say no laws were broken. Look at what they're doing, and look at how they're just so nonchalantly engaging in such barbaric behavior. How do you defend that, New York Times? Are we that far removed from humanity that we cannot look at those videotapes and say there's something wrong here? There's something wrong with the culture that would allow for the ease of a conversation when we're talking about harvesting the organs of recently aborted fetuses, how we're talking about how we use modern medical technology to preserve body parts to make sure that they're profitable after this abortion has taken place. Are we that far removed from who we are that this is a new normal, a compassionless society that does not understand the value of life? Because if that's where we are, then the New York Times is dead on. But, Craig, I don't think we're there.
Well, I don't think we are either. I mean, there's been enough grousing in this country over, for example, what happens with the harvesting of body parts in communist China and how barbaric that practice is. And here we are finding ourselves doing the exact same thing. I think it should not go without notice that a number of big corporations that heretofore apparently had been donors to Planned Parenthood immediately wish to distance themselves from all of this. I see that Coca-Cola Company, Ford, and Xerox have all said, don't put our name on your website.
Yeah, and you know, and I think that's great, because that to me signals that there's still hope for our culture. And when you have corporations, and it takes a lot for these corporations to do this, especially for a less-leaning organization, because you know the press isn't going to be as gung-ho as if it was a conservative-leaning organization. And I think when you see that this is taking place here, I think that we can understand that there is a changing dynamic. Abortion has been really off the table for a long time. We haven't really talked about it. You'd have some laws passed. You'd have some attempts to limit it. But this country really has not had a in-depth discussion about abortion in a long time. And I think now, when you have the marriage cases all taken care of, in a sense of there's a vacuum, I really hope that the conservative movement uses this opportunity to say, okay, we need to reboot the discussion on abortion. We need to reboot how this nation views abortion, and we have to stop the lies that have been promulgated by Planned Parenthood and their liberal allies, and we have to basically have a full, frank discussion on whether this is the type of nation we want to be.
Well, and along with that, a good way to get that dialogue started is by defunding Planned Parenthood. If they want to go out and raise money from private parties that have no morals and wish to engage in this kind of behavior until such times we're able to get it made illegal in this nation, then, knock yourselves out, but don't use my tax dollars to do it. And I think that would be a good first step.
I think so too. And I think that this conversation is being handed to us on a platter because, again, I remember, Craig, when I was first in law school, I remember when I was a poli-sci major in college, the argument that I would get hit with all the time is that you're dealing with just a mound of cells, it's just a blob, it doesn't feel, it doesn't have any type of independence from the mother, it's basically like a cancer. That was always a big thing. And if that was true, then how are you harvesting hearts and lungs and arms and legs and all of this stuff? Planned Parenthood has lied. They've engaged in a brilliant marketing campaign that has created a fantasy island for abortion. And what has happened with this video, Craig, and this is why I think this is the perfect time to reboot this discussion, is that it has removed that mask from Planned Parenthood. We are now seeing warts and all, and I think the American people are repulsed. Most Americans didn't want to have this conversation because it's an uncomfortable conversation. They would much rather believe the lies that Planned Parenthood had said because it's a little bit easier than to have to confront with what has happened over the last 3 decades, 4 decades.
And we're beginning to see more and more, not only that they are morally debased, but also extremely deceptive. Our thanks to Joe Murray, constitutional lawyer, writer, and reporter, for helping us gain some deeper insight at the top stories of this week. A time out, back with more as Lifeline continues.